This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
At least 50 people killed in 2 attacks in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Local officials have blamed an ISIL-linked group ADF for the violence and killings. South African president announces a level 2 COVID lockdown in the country. And in our new series starting today, we bring you stories behind kidnappings and banditry in Africa's most populous nation, Nigeria. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. The details on those stories coming up in just a moment, but first, here's Ramanyang with the day's business headlines. Rama.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Kenya's foreign currency reserves contract for the 4th consecutive week. And the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development says that global output will go up by nearly 6% this year. That's the strongest expansion since 1973. It's not all good news, though. We'll have the details on that and plenty more in about 30 minutes. For now, back to Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. At least 50 people have been killed in 2 militant attacks in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Villagers in Ituri province were reportedly attacked on Sunday evening. Militants targeted the villages of Boga and Chabi. While no group has officially claimed responsibility, a local official speaking to AFP blamed the Allied Democratic Forces for the attack. The ADF is a militant group which has been linked to ISIL. On May the 6th, President Felix Tshisekedi declared a 30-day state of siege in North Kivu and Ituri provinces. This is part of the government's efforts to stop the ADF. Earlier, we spoke to CGTN's Chris Ochamringa about the attacks. He gave us the latest update and also touched on how effective the government's state of siege has been so far.
This attack happened on Sunday evening in 2 villages, Boga and Chabi. According to the eyewitnesses in that area, men who were riding on motorbikes attacked a camp for people who have been displaced in an earlier conflict and started shooting indiscriminately. The initial reports had suggested that there were 39 people who were killed, but the death toll has risen to 50. Now, there are people in that area in Ituri province who are saying that a wife of a traditional leader was one of the victims of this attack, and some of the local leaders in Irumu territory, where the attack happened, are saying that this attack was carried out by the Allied Democratic Forces. This is a rebel group that's originally from Uganda that has carried out more than 300 killings in the east of the DRC. They normally operate in the area of Beni, but there is a monitoring organization that says they've also stretched to Ituri province, which is a mineral-rich area. These are rebels who carry out guerrilla tactics. They live among the community, and so it has been, in the past, it was very hard for the security officials to detect them. And so they're saying when they imposed the state of siege, it was much stronger, much more effective, and that they had seen a decrease in the number of attacks. But, this latest attack shows that, there's still serious gaps despite the number of, an increase in the number of troops in that area, and also the presence of UN peacekeepers who have been in the DRC for more than 2 decades. So it's still a big challenge to determine for sure whether the state of siege has borne fruit.
And we're staying with those developments in the DRC and crossing over to Dr. Hassan Kaneje. He's the director of the Horn Institute. He's joining us from Nairobi. Dr. Kaneje, thank you for joining us on Africa Live. Could you explain to us what is happening in Eastern DRC?
What is going on in DRC is a culmination of years of ethnic conflict and displacement of persons. The situation that has been made worse by repeated volcanic activity, of course, has led to mass displacement of people. And this creates a fertile ground for insurgency and conflict profiteers. And so what we see going on is the ungoverned spaces that has been created by years of conflict are being exploited by insurgency groups and extremist groups, and most recently the Islamist extremist group called the Allied Democratic Forces.
So the army and local civil rights groups have blamed what you've mentioned, the group that you've mentioned, the Allied Democratic Forces. Who exactly are the ADF and why are they so violent?
The Allied Democratic Forces is an Islamist insurgent group that has origins in Uganda about 25, 26 years ago. Now, it has evolved its ideology from more secular kind of resistance to a very Islamist ideology that is in line with, for instance, the likes of ISIS. And so far, it has been the most vicious group, especially when it comes to the extent of attacks and damage and just the sheer brutality that is been executing in Eastern Congo. And so, while it initially was a Ugandan outfit, it settled in DR Congo and it has become perhaps the greatest Islamist terrorist group that is operating in the Congo right now.
All right, so if it has moved from Uganda and is now in Eastern DRC, is there any way of stopping the group's attacks?
Recently, the Congolese president or president of the Democratic Republic of Congo had ordered an operation against them. And of course, the international community and the United States have expressed concerns, especially considering its affiliation with global jihadism. However, these efforts are not sufficient. And just like any other global jihadist group, is going to take concerted efforts and coordinated response, both regionally and by the international community to be able to rein in the activities of this group. And the situation is complicated by the fact that Congo is a very vast country, and the presence of ungoverned spaces, they exist on multiple fronts and in multiple places. And so the size and the sheer complexity of the problem in Congo, of course, which is complicated by the ongoing ethnic problems and mass displacement of persons, is going to make it very difficult, especially to win that a war against them in the short term. However, as we have seen elsewhere, I think concerted and coordinated efforts by the region and by the international community are going to yield the kind of results that perhaps that region hopes to see.
All right, Dr. Hassan Haneji joining us there via Zoom in Nairobi. Now, around 400,000 residents have fled the city of Goma in the DRC. This comes after authorities warned of further volcanic eruptions. Some have fled the DRC and sought shelter in neighboring Rwanda. Many of those fleeing now face the risk of contracting cholera. CGTN's Mohamed Abubakar is in Kigali. He joins us live with more details. Mohamed, what is the latest on those affected by the volcano streaming into Rwanda?
Well, Beatrice, since the first volcanic eruption happened in 22nd, thousands of residents of Goma cities or other villages around Goma have had to flee to the neighboring towns in Goma and also across the border to Rwanda. The Ministry of Emergency and Disaster Management here in Rwanda have managed to set up camps, various camps across Rubavu district to make sure they take care of these displaced families. They're called emergency transit sites for now, and during the course of last week, the fact that there were news that a second eruption might be happening, some of the families that found out their homes were not completely destroyed crossed back to try and find just salvage some of the remainings in their houses, but there are families that could not go back, and their houses were completely destroyed. So we managed to visit one of these camps in Rubavu district just to find out more about these families that were displaced and what kind of help and aid is being given to them, and we filed this report. It has been over a week since the Democratic Republic of Congo's city of Goma was hit by a volcanic eruption. Mount Nyiragongo, one of the world's most active volcanoes, sent its lava downhill towards the city, destroying 17 villages along the way. This forced thousands of residents to flee the city, with majority crossing the border to neighboring Rwanda to seek refuge. This is Busesemana Transit Camp, one of the 3 camps set up by the Rwanda's Ministry of Emergency Management in Rubavu district. It has since managed to hold hundreds of the displaced families. For the last few days, some families have been crossing back into Goma after finding out that their homes were not destroyed by the volcanic eruption. However, as you can see behind me, some will still be stuck at this camp simply because they have no home to go back to.
This is Dusabe Kagirima, a mother of 6. She's been here for a week, but she can't go home. The lava flow burnt everything she owns.
We had to flee on the night of the eruption. We've been here ever since then. My house got burnt down, all the crops too. I don't even know where we're going to go now. I don't know for how long my kids and I will be here. I can't go back home if we have no place to live in.
The same thread of depressing stories runs throughout this place. The camp has numerous humanitarian aid organizations providing necessary and urgent assistance to the families, providing meals, water, sanitary materials, and also offering emotional support.
Yeah, the most affected include the children and also women, especially mothers, and also people with some disabilities. We have also recruited 8 community volunteers that are based in the camp who are actually assisting us to identify those special cases.
They are safe right now because when you see them laughing, when you see them, they have joy, they enjoy what you do, you play with them, and if they feel like you are with them, like they're not alone. So I think they feel comfortable and healthy for them as well.
With the danger of a second volcanic eruption still a possibility, plans to increase the capacity of the camp are already underway. The plan is to continue providing a safe haven for the displaced families for as long as they need to, before it is safe to cross back to the other side of the border. Mohamed Abubakar for CGTN, Rubavu District, Rwanda.
Well, Mohammed, it's quite a dire situation over there. There are reports now of a cholera outbreak in some of the camps. What is the latest and how is Rwanda preparing to deal with an influx of even more people?
Well, Rwanda is yet to announce any cases of cholera in Rwanda, in the camps that are in Rwanda. As we all know, Sake have announced the 6 cases in the last 24 hours. We all know that Sake is an endemic area to cholera cases, and about 2 weeks ago they had reported around nearly 20 suspected cholera cases, and with the influx of families going into that small town, it was only expected that the number will increase.
Mohamed Abubakar for us there in Kigali. Apologies for that. He's giving us the very latest from Kigali on the DRC situation. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization could face a major shakeup as part of efforts to prevent future pandemics. On Monday, health ministers agreed to study recommendations made by experts to strengthen the UN agency. The move is part of plans to create a new global treaty to fight against pandemics. Member states are set to be in charge of the reforms following the anticipation of an EU resolution. The health ministers from 194 member states also agreed to meet on November the 29th to discuss whether to launch negotiations on the global pandemic treaty.
Right now, the pathogens have the upper hand. They're emerging more frequently and often silently in a planet that's out of balance. And as we've seen with Ebola, we've seen with other diseases, they can amplify and spread in our communities and our healthcare facilities, unknown, unseen, and undetected, until they then spread within countries and between countries, endangering all of humanity.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has moved the country back to lockdown level 2. He made the announcement during a televised national address on Sunday. After several months of low transmission of coronavirus cases, South Africa has seen a spike in infections in several parts of the country. President Ramaphosa has warned that South Africa is moving into a third wave of COVID-19 infections. CGTN's Yolisan Jamela has more details.
President Cyril Ramaphosa says an increase in gatherings is directly responsible for the rise in transmissions. He highlighted funerals and school sporting events as particularly problematic.
Because rates of infections have been low for some time, and because we are all suffering from pandemic fatigue, we have tended to become complacent. We have not been as vigilant about wearing our masks all the time. We have not been avoiding crowded places, and we have been socializing a lot more. As a result, infections are surging again.
The increase in transmissions has significantly shot up in the past week alone. Over the last 7 days, there's been an average of 3,745 daily new infections.
This is an increase of 31% on the previous week and an increase of 66% on the week before that. The proportion of COVID-19 tests that are positive has more than doubled in the last month, from around 4% to more than 11%, even as we have increased testing across the country.
The level 2 restrictions include non-essential establishments like restaurants, bars, and fitness centers to close by 10 p.m. All gatherings to be limited to a maximum of 100 people indoors and 250 people outdoors. Where the venue is too small to accommodate these numbers with appropriate social distancing, then no more than 50% of the capacity of the venue may be used. Wearing a mask when in public remains compulsory. The nationwide curfew has also now been tightened. The curfew will now start at 11 p.m. and end at 4 a.m. Further restrictions are being imposed to ensure the healthcare sector is not overwhelmed and to allow as many people as possible to be vaccinated before the third wave hits.
According to the scientists that advise government, the severity of this third wave will largely be determined by the amount of contact each of us has with other people. We will reduce the pressure on our hospitals, and in doing so, we will save many lives.
South Africa is currently in phase 2 of its vaccination program. That is targeting those health workers who have not been vaccinated during the first phase, as well as people who are over 60 years of age. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Egypt will from the 1st of June lift restrictions imposed to curb the spread of the coronavirus. The government will ease a curfew and allow shops and restaurants to operate for 4 more hours daily. The country has so far reported more than 260,000 COVID-19 cases. Adil Mahroui reports.
For the past 2 weeks, Egypt's daily COVID-19 infections have been dropping. That encouraged the government during its Sunday's review meeting to begin easing measures it imposed to limit viral infections. From the 1st of June, the curfew will be eased, allowing shops and restaurants to run from 5 a.m. until 1 after midnight, thus increasing their operating time by 4 hours. The High Egyptian Committee to manage the COVID-19 crisis will also allow public parks and beaches to reopen. Public gatherings and events will remain banned within indoor halls and areas. That includes religious celebrations, funerals, weddings, or conferences. Meanwhile, the Egyptian Health Ministry is working to expand its vaccination capabilities. Currently, more than 400 vaccine centers have the capacity to inoculate 110,000 citizens daily. Egypt plans to increase that figure to 500,000 in the coming weeks, as it aims to vaccinate 50% of the population by the end of the year. The government also announced purchasing 20 million doses of the Russian Sputnik V COVID-19 vaccine and another 20 million from Johnson & Johnson as it moves to allocate jabs to cover its domestic need. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on our program. In our new series starting today, we bring you stories behind kidnappings and banditry in Africa's most populous nation, Nigeria.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent, to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Administration, Tunis,
Nigeria,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
This week, we are focusing on the rising cases of kidnap for ransom in Nigeria. The situation in the West African nation is driven by militancy and economic reasons. However, Nigeria is not the first nation to face this challenge. Here is CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy with a brief look at the global kidnappings for ransom industry.
It has been around for centuries. In fact, Nero, one of the most controversial Roman emperors, is said to have fallen victim. Here in Africa, conflicts between counties and clans often ended with women and children being kidnapped and forcefully taken in as brides and foster children of warriors. However, in modern times, kidnap for ransom is prohibited. United Nations Office on Drug and Crime describes it as hostage-taking. However, different countries have different laws that govern the prosecution of kidnap for ransom cases. Figures from the UN body say kidnap for ransom cases represented only 6.9% of terrorism cases between 1970 and 2010. But 2016 moving forward has seen a surge in kidnappings. The rise of Al-Qaeda and ISIL has seen jihadist groups monetizing this as part of their asymmetrical warfare. Here in Africa, Al-Shabaab terror group brought this crime to the fore in East Africa and has been using it on local and foreign victims. The Gulf of Aden also saw a marked rise in piracy cases in mid-2000s. Pirates with roots in the same Somalia seized tens of commercial ships and sailors and demanded payments for their freedom. Many shipping lines were forced to pay millions of dollars to secure release for their ships and crews. A clique of millionaires grew out of the acts. The Gulf of Guinea is still grappling with a similar challenge. But in total, terrorist groups appear to be reaping big from kidnap for ransom. In Nigeria, kidnap for ransom seems to be driven by two forces: Boko Haram and its splinter group Islamic State's West Africa province have been attacking villages and learning institutions and taking thousands of locals hostage. The victims are later turned into sex slaves and fighters. The mass kidnappings of Chibok schoolgirls in April 2014 remains one of the most daring attacks to happen in Africa. On the other hand, gangs locally known bandits have been targeting mostly learning institutions with the sole purpose of demanding for payment to release the victims. Kidnapping for ransom by gangs is linked to economic reasons. Whatever the case, the current situation is placing Africa's largest economy on the map for all the wrong reasons. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
The recent string of attacks targeting schools and other learning institutions has brought Nigeria's problem of banditry and kidnappings to the forefront. Many factors have led to an increase in such crimes, including underfunded security forces and the easy access to small arms. The kidnappings have increased due to the huge sums of money involved. To get loved ones back, families are being forced to pay the demanded ransom in cash. This week, in our new special series, we take an in-depth look at kidnappings and banditry in Nigeria. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with that report.
The trend of kidnappings in Nigeria began in 2006 in the oil-rich Niger Delta region. Militants fighting to attract global attention to the plight of the people of the region abducted expatriate oil workers. But the modus operandi would later change. The militants began kidnapping for ransom, and before long, even Nigerians became targets. 15 years later, kidnap for ransom has become a booming industry. The once peaceful north is now the epicenter of banditry and abductions.
It's a very lucrative industry. You go in, you make money, you come out. And other people who also see you, they get involved. See, people now own kidnap groups and they resource them. The kidnap is done, money is collected, is brought back for the Oga, who ensure that everybody that is in the ring gets paid. And everybody smiles to the bank.
Nigeria's leading intelligence consultancy, SBM Intelligence, estimates that between June 2011 and March 2020, at least $18.34 million has been paid to kidnappers as ransom.
Right now, a lot of people are in it. And then, of course, the sponsors are becoming many. So it is something to be worried about as a parallel economy in Nigeria.
It was not an easy thing at
Victims
all.
of kidnapping can take a long time to recover from their experience. In November last year, Morgan, who did not want his face shown, spent weeks negotiating the release of two of his relatives who were kidnapped while traveling in the northwestern Kaduna state. They regained their freedom only after a ransom was paid. The kidnappers held them hostage for close to a month.
It's more than emotional torture. All we could do then was to pray that nothing happened to them. But we've heard of instances where they will kidnap people, you will pay ransom, and they will still kill the people in their custody. So we were scared. Presently now, it is difficult for me to travel from one state to the other. Presently now, I can't even try it, if not by flight, if not by air. I can't travel from one state to the other. But if I have to, at least there should be some amount of police protection or army or escorts generally.
Despite several military bombardments of their hideouts and forests around the north of the country, the bandits are not relenting. They're still kidnapping people. This controversial Islamic cleric has been leading a self-sponsored mediation effort to get the bandits to lay down their arms and give up their criminal enterprise. He's also been involved in several successful negotiations to free students in recent kidnapping incidents. He says negotiation rather than military operation is key to ending the menace. Islamic cleric has also made it clear he is not opposed to the payment of ransom, saying saving lives is more important.
So I think this argument that when you give them money, they will buy weapons. No, let the government stand up and work. Give them the money, then you know where you can catch them. This money they're asking is big money. You can put chips on it, you can track where money is, you can follow them and catch your money. But I don't want a situation whereby the choice is between lives and bandits over money and bandits.
The government has ruled out any form of negotiation or ransom payment to the bandits, and the position of the Islamic cleric has divided opinions in the country.
It is the ransom, the payment of ransom, that is making this business to boom. The citizens have to understand that yes, government will not pay ransom, and we are not going to pay either. When somebody is kidnapped, we don't allow the person to stay with the kidnappers for too long. We will make sure that from the very first phone call, government agencies, special forces that are trained to deal with this should be out there looking for them. Because it has festered all over the place because nobody is looking for them, nobody is putting them on comfortably. We are paying ransom and they are just enjoying the money. So it is business as usual, and it's a booming business.
There are no easy answers to the banditry and kidnapping crisis in Nigeria. The country's military is stretched to the limit, taking on bandits in the northwest, separatist militants in the southeast, and Boko Haram in the northeast. But whatever it takes, the citizens of this country say they just want peace. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
On Monday, Kenya will mark 4 years since the China-built standard gauge railway began operations. Afri-Star is the company that runs the SGR, and staff say the train services have changed how goods and people move. Enoch Sikolia caught up with employees who have worked with the SGR since the start of the project.
For several years now, these beams and columns of the standard gauge railway have shaped the landscape of Kenya's coastal city of Mombasa. And for the 4 years, trains have been moving atop the rail. The country's transport sector has really changed, and no one understands these changes more than the men and women who work hard to ensure its success.
My name is David Kimani Gitundu. I've been with Afrista for the last 4.5 years. I'm a locomotive driver by profession, and I'm also a team leader, and I'm also an instructional driver.
My name is Harrison Kimani Kinyanjui. I am currently serving as an assistant superintendent of Mombasa, Nairobi, and Nairobi Naivasha Dispatching Center. My journey with Afrista and working in the railway industry began in 2017 February, where I enrolled for training in Railway Training Institute for Kenya Railways. I studied as a train crew, and upon completion of my training in Railway Training Institute, I joined CRBC to work as a train crew.
I've gone through that process of being an assistant driver, and now I'm a qualified locomotive driver. And my first driver locomotive was in 2017. 2017, that was the first time that I did the driving of locomotive from Mombasa to Nairobi. Then I began driving the shunting locomotive. That is when I became the team leader for the shunting team.
My team and I are the ones who command the train operations straight from the departure station or across the stations. We command in terms of what train will depart, at what time will a train depart, will go and stop in which station, stop particularly in what track, stop for how long, then depart at what time, excuse which train to pass. Why should we excuse this train to pass and not the other one? So we are the brainwork that does the train operation command.
My name is Titus Kiprop. I'm the Deputy Superintendent in Nairobi Workshop, the Track and Signal Department. When I see containers being loaded and transported to Mombasa and they're shipped, I feel so proud because this is the line I do maintenance each and every day, and I'm really happy because the line had not been maintained as it's supposed to be, then this process going on here would not have happened.
SGR is, we can say it has really impacted the society in a very positive way. So when I report to job and I know that maybe I'm ferrying people from Nairobi to Mombasa, and I know that, then it keeps me going knowing that I'm impacting the society in a positive way. Yeah, and when I see maybe cargo flowing to and fro, and I know that I'm the one who is responsible for such huge tasks to be achieved, then it really motivates me to keep working.
I've actually learned to be a quick thinker, because this train needs this attention, this train needs this attention, this one needs this attention, and by the end of the day you have to ensure all of them have a smooth train operation to the final arrival station.
For those who work with the SGR, Kenyans are embracing rail transport once again, and they believe that soon enough that rail will be busy. Enoxi Kolia, CGTN, Mombasa, Kenya.
The Chinese Communist Party has made remarkable progress in uplifting China's economy and people out of poverty, and stands as a practical example for African nations. This is according to Zimbabwe's former ambassador to China, Christopher Mutsvangwa. CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya spoke to him about the Chinese Communist Party's 100th anniversary and the leadership of President Xi Jinping.
President Xi came to Harare en route to the FOCAC summit in 2015. How significant was that? What were your impressions of him from that?
When he was going to attend the China-Africa summit in Johannesburg, I think it was in 2015, he made it a point of making Zimbabwe stop over. You know, it means he cherishes the bilateral relationships which were started by Chairman Mao and Chu Enlai in the 1960s, and our Chairman Herbert Chitepo, and the likes of our General Tongogara, and of course our present President Emerson E.D. Mnangagwa, who was trained as a young man of a fledgling nationalist guerrilla army in Nanjing in the 1960s. So he puts a premium on the relationships between Zimbabwe and China, and that trip, that stopover for a few hours, was a remarkable show of a gesture of solidarity with Zimbabwe. He's a modest man who is passionate about the role of China, but who is also very, very internationalistic in his outlook, as has been espoused in his Belt and Road Initiative. This is a good leader who we all would be happy to be associated with.
Been your impressions of President Xi Jinping's leadership over the past years?
President Xi has been very good at digging into the history of China from the experience of the previous leaders of the Chinese Communist Party in the last 100 years, but more so since the triumph of the revolution. And he has taken the best aspects of his mentors, the Communist part of China, the various from Chairman Mao, Deng Xiaoping, and the other modern leaders. He has gleaned from them and built a corpus of knowledge which has made him make China scale the challenge of modernization. Now China is focusing on the key technologies of the future so that the economy of China can deliver more, not only to the Chinese people, but to the world. His Belt and Road initiative on how we should integrate and share the development experience of the whole world in a global village is a remarkable philosophy of how humanity should approach the shared challenges of how we can integrate and increase prosperity, shared prosperity by humanity.
Well, let's now go to Ramanyang for the latest business news. Rama.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in business. Kenya's foreign currency reserves contract for the 4th consecutive week. We'll look at the numbers. And the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development says global output will rise by nearly 6% this year. That's the biggest expansion since 1973.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
Let's start in East Africa. Kenya's foreign currency reserves have continued to contract for the 4th consecutive week, according to data released by the Central Bank of Kenya. Those reserves fell to $7.48 billion on the 27th of May 2021. That's a 5-week low and 1% lower than the $7.546 billion the central bank had on the 20th of May. Despite that dip, the reserves do still meet the CBK's target of at least having 4 months of import cover and the East African Community requirement of at least 1.5 months of import cover available as far as the forex reserves are concerned. The shilling has remained relatively stable against the US dollar and other major currencies. It was trading at 107.57 to the dollar on the 27th of May compared to 107.92 to the dollar on the 20th of the same month. According to the central bank, gross domestic debt went up to $33.4 billion on the 21st of May from $31.5 billion at the end of 2020. On to Zimbabwe now. The country has a fair bit of potential to earn around $1 billion a year from its horticultural sector. The government has rolled out a national development strategy that incorporates rural farmers to attain that goal. As CGTN's Farai Makutuya now reports, Zimbabwe once upon a time was a major and growing exporter of flowers, vegetables and other horticultural products, with frequent flights airlifting these to markets around the world.
It's rapid, non-stop and thorough work on Churchill Farm as harvesting of Mange 2 peas is underway. 13 hectares of the crop have been grown here, all of it for export. Consignments of the freshest vegetables are dispatched from this packhouse 3 times a week, destined for markets in Europe. But there are plans actively underway to open up new territories. Lucrative orders have come in from the United Arab Emirates.
The contract that we've got at the moment with United Arab Emirates is got to do with garlic, it's got to do with ginger, it's got to do with potatoes, it's got to do with onions and so forth. Those we can give to small-scale farmers because we will not be able to grow them on our own farms because of rotations as well. And the numbers are big. We're talking between 5,000 and 10,000 tons, and that cannot be grown on one crop. So we see this as an opportunity that's going to open for us in Zimbabwe, which is a big window for outgrowers.
Expanding hectarage and inclusivity fits into a national strategy to expand production from 2020 levels.
We're on 114,000 tons with a value at around $77 million. And we obviously projecting that we can triple that in the next 3 years. It's critical for us to have all farmers on board. So we're very much focused on developing new farmers. It depends, and also there are sort of sector specific. So we're not trying to say farmers who have been subsistence farmers must come on board and export blueberries. It's not going to happen like that. But we will definitely support in the crops that make sense financially and where we can lobby and represent those farmers.
The horticulture industry wants government to speed up trade negotiations and finalize protocols with key markets like China, as well as ease export processes which will enable farmers to be competitive. That, combined with a favorable climate, will help the country quickly reap the low-hanging fruit that the sector represents for the economy. Farai Makutuya, CGTN, Marondera, Zimbabwe.
Back into East Africa, tourism in Uganda has started to pick up after revenues fell by 73% last year due to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Tour operators in Uganda say that many of the visitors are coming in from the United Kingdom and the United States. From Kampala, here's CGTN's Isabel Nakiria.
Visitor numbers in Uganda are going up. Tour operators are seeing a rise in bookings, especially from Europe and the United States after the sector shut down last year due to COVID-19.
Of course, there are inquiries coming in. And at the end of the day, when inquiries come in, you're optimistic that definitely out of 10, you're likely to get 5 or 4, which is not bad. Now, when you roll back, that changes the picture of how previous months have been.
There are signs that Uganda's tourism industry could go back to its former glory before COVID-19. Tourism was one of Uganda's top revenue earners, bringing in $1.6 billion annually. Tour operators say the task now is to improve their marketing strategies to attract more visitors. Foreign tourists' booking grew between August 2020 and March 2021. The national parks that had completely shut their doors saw visitor numbers double, according to a survey by the Ministry of Tourism.
Weekly flights within or to and out of Uganda increased fourfold by the end of March 2021, rising from a weekly average of 3 flights in 2020 to a weekly average of 11 flights in 2021. This means that 73% of the flights that fly our routes have resumed business.
The country is now bracing for an influx of tourists as European countries reopen after months of lockdown. The UK, which is one of Uganda's top tourist markets, has placed Uganda on its list of safer countries, while its neighbors fall on the red list. But concern is rising after infections shot up in Uganda. Tour operators fear this could reverse the gains made.
It worries me sometimes because I look at the work done in the previous month, let's say January, February and March, and now this new wave and how we are supposed to handle it.
Uganda is going through a new wave of COVID-19 infections and hospitals are filling up, creating anxiety of a possible lockdown. And with just slightly over 500,000 people vaccinated, the hope is that the new infections are contained to allow the economy to open up fully and tourism to thrive again. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
A little bit of crystal ball gazing now, this time focused on the global economy, and the outlook is somewhat positive. The Paris-based think tank, the OECD, says that global output will grow by at least 5.8% this year. That is the strongest expansion on record since 1973. The OECD also raised its global growth forecast for 2022 to 4.4%, a level it says would be enough to bring most of the world back to pre-pandemic levels of activity. The OECD has also raised its GDP forecast for major economies around the world, the US at 6.9%, the Eurozone at 4.3%, China at 8.5%. But it did warn of a very uneven recovery. It pointed to possibly lower living standards compared to the pre-pandemic world, at least in the emerging markets and developing economies. On to India now. Government data over there shows that economic growth picked up to 1.6% year on year in the first quarter of 2021. That, however, is before a massive second wave of COVID-19 infections hit the country last month. The economy contracted by 7.3% for the entire year. A slow vaccination drive and restrictions across the country have hit economic activities from retail, transport to construction, while putting millions of Indians out of work. India is the second worst infected country in the world, behind the United States. To date, it reported more than 28 million cases. Over 329,000 people have died due to COVID-19. I'll leave you there for the time being, but I'll be back at the top of the hour. In global business, we'll be heading over to Zimbabwe. The mines ministers threatened to withdraw platinum mining concessions from Total Mining. It's a group of investors from Russia, Cyprus, Nigeria and Kazakhstan. But this particular mining concession has been repossessed by the state several times. What's going on? We'll have some answers for you live from Harare at 1800 GMT. See you then. For now, back to Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's up in your sports news. Over 400 athletes to be invited for the June 17th to 19th Kenya Athletics Trials for the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games.